So good afternoon. I'm Bryan Searle. I'm a potato grower here in eastern Idaho in Shelley. I've grown potatoes my entire life. First off, just let me apologize. I was looking forward to being there in person, but this afternoon my youngest son and daughter-in-law are graduating from college, and so as important as each of you are, they are ranked up there just a little bit higher. So anyway, hope you'll understand that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about our experiences in life. I'm a third generation potato farmer, and we've lived here our entire lives. My father and my grandfather moved here from Utah and began farming. And you know, we were rolling along, and you have the day-to-day challenges and from year to year and prices and different things. And then it was in 2006, it was the crop from 2005. We started to hear that there was a pest that was found that was on the quarantine list, and so you know, we were all made aware of it. It was in the news. Didn't worry too much about it until they went through a lot of investigation, and can't come to find out it traced back to some potatoes that we might have ran. And so the history on that is in 2005, early spring, around April time, a neighbor pulled in the yard and said that he had a little 50-acre piece of ground, and the guy that had been renting it couldn't get financed. And so he asked if we were interested in renting it, and we said, oh yeah, absolutely. It was right on top of us right there. And so we went in and we planted potatoes, and they were Alturas was the variety, and they were a great crop and went in the storage. And so later, well, early in the next year, around March, April, they ran 4 loads of those potatoes out of that front of that pile, and that's when the concern was. So it traced back to that, and then as investigators come, they flip their badge at us, and we kind of went, what's going on here? And they said, you know, we need to go test your soil. Well, we had grain that was a foot to 2 feet tall or better, and it was like, well, we don't want people tromping all out through our grain fields like a herd of animals and doing damage. And so we showed some resistance at first, and we've been told by others just keep them away. And so we did that, and the badges became a little bigger. And so we said, how about this? This was a handline field, and we had sprayed some lines for the pipe to go down. And so we said, how about you just go walk down those lines if you really need to sample now, because there wasn't any grain growing there. And that's what they did. They proceeded and came back, and that's when they found an infestation that was there. That's when life changed completely for us, for all of those who lived here in the Shelley area, and for the potato industry, because instantly you know, borders were shut down and concerns were had, and that had effects throughout this great state, from the north end to the south, the nursery industry, and on through. So we were all very concerned, and so we began to have a lot of meetings to find out, you know, where are we going from here forward. And those early days was a learning experience for all. We would go from one idea to another. First, it was an area that was put in to be regulated, and any equipment that moved outside of that area, a few mile radius, would have to be sanitized. A great inconvenience and costly to have equipment sit and be washed and crews wait, and it began to cost us a lot of money, to say the least. And so from that, some of the guidelines came out that they would go and test some of the other fields that were associated, and from there another field tested positive, and another field tested positive. And you know, at the time, all our neighbors were pointing fingers at us. So we had the leprosy, and we were poisoned, the poison people, and it wasn't very fun, to say the least. We had people that really didn't want rent any ground to us and do anything because of what was there. And again, being the unknown of what was there. So we proceeded forward, and growers in the area would get together for some meetings with APHIS and the state, and there was a lot of resistance that was there, again, because it was, you don't want you to ruin my life. It was really kind of what the attitude was, and not knowing what that future was. So through that process, it was decided that Idaho was going to eradicate, and that word went out through the world that we would eradicate this problem and set forth to do so. Again, there was nothing definitely written in black and white, and we didn't really have any exiting plan. We'd kind of heard some, but we didn't know exactly what that was. So as we proceeded forward, we began to again do what we could to farm. There was times that because associated fields were tested, it cost us again a lot of money, because sometimes we'd get results just days before a crop was to be planted. We had a lot of fertilizer and fumigant on that field, and we had to just take the losses that were there on those fields. And so we did everything that we could to get through that time. Again, there was a lot of resistance, and there was a lot of heated meetings that went on from time to time, and so that's when methyl bromide was investigated and said, okay, here's an option to eradicate, and come forward with an eradication option. Methyl bromide was an experience in itself. As plastic was put on behind those machines, wind picked it up and blew it through the air and tipped pivots over and took power lines down, and it was very challenging, to say the least. And but it did take care of a lot of the PCN, and we've seen results that were starting from that, and so the effectiveness of that was showing forth. I remember meeting in those meetings, and this is, as a grower, I'll just toot our horns as growers. I remember growers asking the questions, saying, so this methyl bromide, is it going to be okay? Is there going to be any carryover? We don't want to sterilize our soil. We don't want to have any problems. And we were assured that there would not be any problems. And so, again, we kind of bowed our head and went forward with it. And we found out later that the bromide was in the ground. And as we began growing some crops and bringing that out, we had high bromine in the soil, which posed the next challenge that came along, and how to deal with that. And that's where we continued to look for other options. I guess my take on things always is, let's see what we can do to work for solutions. None of us want to be hit with something like this, but let's work for some options. And that's where lychee tomato was introduced. Again, I was on ground zero on that, and I was the one that had neighbors looking and saying, you're bringing in something in here that's on the invasive species list, and it's going to spread, and it's going to be our next challenge. But I was willing to say, you know what, I think it's been looked at close enough, and if we're careful and take care of it, we'll be just fine. And so we went through meetings there to help to educate individuals as to how we would take care of that, and meet with the weed superintendents and individuals as we went forward with that. The effectiveness of that, again, we saw a lot of efficiencies, and I know you'll hear some more about that through these meetings, but there was results there. And so it was exciting there that we weren't using a chemical, but the challenge was, you couldn't grow anything on your ground. So you have a farm payment, or you have a pivot payment, and again, what are you supposed to do? And so we were able to receive some help that way, and in some of those fields that had methyl bromide, the straw was able to had some options as well. So through the whole thing, I think we've all learned a lot. There's been a lot of inconsistencies, and I don't point fingers at anybody, because I don't think anybody, sat and said, let's just change this to make anyone's life miserable at all. But it has been challenging at times to know, okay, what is the way out? And that's been that's probably right now our biggest frustration, I would say. Through the years, we have organized as growers and kind of called the PCN group, and got together to say, what can we do? We've been to our state legislature and presented there, and we've tried to attend as many meetings as possible to say, okay, which is the way out? Obviously, we feel kind of like the underdog. We feel like the way out is very difficult. We feel like a field that was quarantined could be quarantined for extremely low. A few bugs that were found. There's even a field that was found that we can't even find anything today that didn't even have methyl bromide or any treatments. And that's always frustrating to say, okay, it's quarantined, but you can't even find anything. So those were our frustrations. But through testing out of that, once a treatment and that's cleaned up, then to have to, at first it was going to be 4 crops, and the sample rates have always been concerning to us. They're very inconsistent to what the world standards are. What we test here in Idaho at 20 pounds per acre, just in a regular sample, that amount has changed through the years. We've had 5 pounds and 10 and 15, and I don't know all of them. I may be misquoting them, but it's kind of all changed, and we feel like it's in a heavy amount of soil that's taken. So once that field's quarantined and they come back out, coming in and taking a 50-pound sample, and we just feel that's very unfair. It's not consistent with world standards. World standards are closer to a pound per acre, and I've been in other countries and they're growing potatoes in fields that have been quarantined. I recognize Idaho decided to eradicate, but the way out is very steep and very, very difficult, because it ties that field up for so many years. And the challenge is when it tests that there's no cysts that are viable, the challenge to us is, and we go grow a crop, it's still regulated, and we don't have marketing avenues to move those crops. And through the years, we had some avenues, and those have all kind of gone by the wayside. So we don't have warehouses that are willing. It's been very costly to some of them as well, and we've had to, we personally and our insurance and others have had to pay for tear dirt to be removed and different things, again, that have cost lots of money. And so we just feel like the way out is way too steep. If we do, if it's goes through bioassay and we find that we're good, we believe that a year or two is plenty, but I don't even think it needs to be at 50 pounds sampled there again. Our argument always is, if you tested every piece of dirt in this nation at 50 pounds, we would probably find it in many other places. And so we just feel like, okay, now you have it really, really been worked on. So that's one area that's a frustration. We have fields that they'll find a dead cyst, and then it becomes a suspect field. We feel that as well is very unfair, because you can't do the DNA for number one, and how do we know it didn't move from another field by an animal, by the air? We get 40, 50, 60 mile an hour winds on a regular occasion. So that's the other concern is, all of a sudden that comes there and then it goes suspect, and so that comes to our sanitation. We're washing out of these fields. It's very timely. I would give credit to the fact that there are grants that were given for sanitation units, but again, it's people, it's time, it's money that goes on, and so I know that I know we have to clean up, but it just feels like that over-regulation and overburden, probably a better word, just kind of an overkill of what we're having to do as we go forward. We want to clean it up. We want to make sure it's there, but we also have concern that it's not just here. We've looked so hard at a small area that we sit and think that it might only be here, and I guess I've lived long enough that I feel like that it could be other places, and that's why we feel like it's really not unfair, the fact that what's going on. So we look forward to these options of lychee tomato and others. I know there's others, and I applaud all the research and everything that's gone on. It's come a long ways, and I applaud that. And I've been on board with trying to come with solutions that are there, and I'm on board today. But I think sometimes we spend a lot of money and a lot of time on some things that were overregulated, and some exiting strategies to go forth that are there that maybe there's some other options that would work better. So that kind of wraps up our story, is where we're at. It's been extremely costly to our operation. It is what it is, and we've tried to, like I say, make the best of what we can do as we've gone through this.
Thanks, Bryan. I've got a couple questions. How many potato acres were you farming at the time, and then how much ended up being put into quarantine?
So at the time this happened, we were around 3,500 acres, and of that, we probably had about 1,400 in potatoes. So we were on, just depend on rotation, and we were leasing other potato ground and different things.
And then what was your rotation then, and then what has it had to be now?
So, we had fields that was 2 years of grain, and then they'd go potatoes. We had fields that was 1 year. It was every other year of potatoes and grain, depending on the variety that was planted. Now in regulated fields, some of them we just flat out planted to hay and said, we're just going to sit out on this because we didn't know the path forward, and we're just going to plant some hay. And hay it's been okay, but it's not been the opportunity of the potato crops. We've lost a lot of income that way, and just kind of let the dust settle on some of it. So that was taken out. We've had to move other places, and again, people look at you as a diseased person, and harsh words come and different things, and individuals say, I'm not renting to you or whatever. But you work through that.
We kind of heard how you felt about when they had to come in and sample for the nematode cyst. How did other growers feel, when the authorities came out and started wanting to sample and actually sampling? How did that make them feel?
So sampling on their ground
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
They were not happy at all. And growers, some resisted, and some said, you will not come. And I know Director Gould, the Department of Ag, had some challenging times and meetings with individuals and had to get some warrants to do that. And so, there was lots of resistance, and there was others that said, here it is, test away. So we personally never resisted, and some days you say, maybe we should have, but don't tell Director Gould that. But we've always tried to cooperate to work for a solution to the challenge that's here.
How did you feel when they put trade barriers initially on all Idaho potatoes, and it was very many countries? I mean, how did that make you feel?
I wanted to crawl in the ground, to be honest. I mean, it was, and yet, it's a field that first year we'd ever rented it. We knew we did nothing whatsoever wrong, but still, when Shelley gets put on the map in the world for something like that, those were tough days. And they're a little easier today, but those were really tough days. And so, knowing you hadn't done anything wrong, you're farming the exact same way as you'd always done, but the fact that something like this was affecting what Idaho's great for, our potatoes, was it was hard.
Do you think that maybe the strictness of, the procedure maybe has helped give confidence to the world about our potatoes and allowing some of those trade to open up?
You know, we know how politics work, and I'll call it that, I guess. It's all in the cell. And I recognize there's a lot of things that we've had to do and we do go through to be able to sell those things. Are they really needed? Probably not. And there's a lot of things that we do in life that probably aren't needed, but we do them because politically that's probably correct. So, for other countries. But I look at, when we take a potato and run it through a warehouse and wash a potato as clean as we do, I see no chance of ever a PCN going anywhere. And then that doesn't go to another country or another state or somewhere. It goes on a plate. It goes to a restaurant. It's eaten. I love eating the skin of the potato, and they're as clean as clean. So, that's why I say I know that it's a sell to the world, but as far as that ever escaping out of here, I don't see how it's not inside the potato. That's the key.
So, what are some lessons you've learned, and anything that you felt our group could have done a little bit differently?
Don't live in Shelley. Some lessons that we learn in life, we don't choose and what's there. But the thing that I've learned, and I continue to learn every day of my life, is we always have to communicate. And though we may not agree, we have to sit down at a table and communicate. And that's really, I think, been, in my opinion, some of the positive things as we've gone forward. We've tried to the best we can, try to communicate those things that are there. I think that we, and I don't wish this on anybody, but I think that we have to be careful how we move, what we do with our equipment. And I look at this PCN, and it poses no harm to the human consumption, and that's always a frustration to us. It's only going to affect me. If I have PCN, it's going to reduce my yield in a certain area, and that's going to cost me, and that's either going to put me out of business. So, there's other nematode that everybody here is aware of. They're much worse as a potato grower, in my opinion, than this one. But the fact that it was on the world quarantine list, I think that's and learning that fact that we got to be careful what we decide to do and how we do that. Whether that's pull samples of terra dirt and look for things. Some say, why are we doing that? And others says, well, that was a good sell to sell Idaho potatoes, and that was a decision we made, and so that's behind us. So I think those are the things that taught me. Let's make sure that we know some of the things that may happen before we make some of the decisions we make.
So you've touched on this a little bit, but finally, what do you feel about the future? How do you feel? What's going to happen?
I'm optimistic about the future. Farmers are always optimistic. We face low prices, and we don't give up. And so we'll conquer this. We have brilliant minds, and I've said in meetings, it's like, just give me 3% of your brain. I'd be a genius if I had, that. But I think that is really the key. Is as we stay on this, we'll have a solution, and when we have that solution, this will be gone. And I hope it's sooner than later. But we always figure it out. We always come with a solution. Something comes, we go, it's the end. It's going to be the end. It's going to be the end of the potato industry. It's going to be whatever. And not so. We will figure this out as we continue to go forward and put all our efforts there to take care of the challenge that faces Idaho.
Okay, thanks, Bryan. We wish you could be here in person, and I hope some of these people get a chance to interact with you on a personal level. Thanks.
I'm always always open to it. So thank you.